Uh, so it looks like we have people coming into the room here, into the spaces. So um, I guess I'll get started now. Thank you everybody for joining us in the conversation here. Um, I'm honored to have Shemeka, Flex, and Ginny joining with me on this conversation. Um, Simple topic, discussing morality and politics. Um, you know, I wanted to hear other people's viewpoints as far as the role of morality in politics. If it's something that we should lean towards, lean away from, and be more constitutional or something of that effect. But let me just go around to Shamika first, if you want to introduce yourself.
Hello, everyone. I'm Shamik Michelle, contributor for Fearless on Blaze TV. Thanks for having me.
Short and sweet. Um, Flex, I don't know if you're able to speak.
I am pretty piecemeal, but I can go ahead and get something. So my name is Flex, although I go by Malcolm Flex, or at least used to in another life. But I'm pretty much a political commentator that also works in research. So I've got a little bit of a scientific background, although I don't know that that'll do me much good in this conversation. But
It's perfectly fine. I like to hear different viewpoints. Everybody has their own opinion. So, and Jenny, introduce yourself.
Hello, everybody. I am Jenny Robinson. I am the CEO of GRC Advising, host of the podcast Uncommon Sense with Jenny Robinson, and I also have a store called The Audacity. So, hello, and I'm happy to be here.
Okay, thank you, Jenny. And myself, anybody who's not familiar with me, my name is Adam Coleman. I'm the founder of Wrong Speak Publishing. I'm also an author of a book called Black Victim to Black Victor, which is not a New York Times bestseller. And I wanted to do, a Twitter Spaces, a conversation discussing this topic. So I'll get it started. I know Shamika is limited on time, so I'll go straight to Shamika. Um, you know, what do you believe is the role of morality within politics? Are you okay with politicians leaning on, let's say, faith-based morality when it comes to making uh, legislative decisions, for example? Is that something that you're okay with personally?
Personally, I'm fine with that. I don't have an issue with anyone having their own faith or believing what they believe, but I think that it shouldn't be pushed on other people. That's kind of where I would have an issue, but I haven't really seen that. I haven't really seen that happen. I think that everyone should have some type of spirituality or something that should kind of bring you back and ground you. So I definitely don't have an issue with that being in politics.
Okay. I'll give an example. Maybe it makes it useful. I think the most obvious example is talking about abortion. Um, for many legislators, let's say Republican legislators, they are Christians. And so, they may be making a decision that's based off of their personal faith, their personal belief system, which centers around their morality and how they live their life. Do you think that's something that is okay to use when discussing legislation for abortion in that case?
Um, for some people, no, and I would say for myself, I never really come at it from a religious aspect. I come of it more so
Mhm.
because of my own personal life. I am a product of rape. And while I wouldn't want to force that on another woman, I do understand that number one, that's less than 1% of all abortions. But number two, something good can come from it. And so I don't really look at it as you have to follow my faith or that somebody's pushing their faith on me. But when somebody says that's not your body, that's the baby's body, that's true. Like, that has really nothing to do with faith. That's just biology. Like, you have your own body, but when you're carrying another body, that's not your body at that point. So when you say my body, my choice, you're kind of infringing on the rights of the baby who has no power to make any type of decision at that point. So I don't really look at that from a faith standpoint. And so I don't have an issue with someone who does. If that's what they believe, then that's fine. But I think it can be spread outside of faith, and it's a much bigger thing for to be able to reach more people, I guess I should say.
Right. And you know what? That is actually a good strategy, to lean on the rights perspective instead of the moral perspective or the religious perspective, to say this is why this shouldn't happen, why we should limit the amount of abortions, or the situations where abortions can happen, by saying it can only happen up to a certain amount of weeks. Um, so, for me, I remember, I'm a Christian, but I remember a period of time in my life where I was agnostic. And one of the things I used to see politicians do, something contentious is going on in DC, they would come back and say, I don't know, I'm going to have to pray on it. And I never liked that answer, because I'm like, well, you have a brain, don't you? Like, make a decision. And I always felt like either they were not being sincere,
Passing the buck.
or yeah, exactly, they're passing the
Mhm.
buck. But to somebody else, someone who let's say is not necessarily politically inclined or apolitical, and they hear that and they're not really the most religious person, to them, they like to go to the thing like separation between church and state. They like to throw that out there as a, that makes a whole lot of sense in these situations. But I always wondered, as someone who is agnostic, why do they always do that when we elected them not as like these spiritual leaders, but as a political leader? Someone who's going to either create laws or change laws, or make sure laws don't change depending on what the situation is, according to what their constituents want, and not necessarily on their personal faith. Um, so that's kind of like one of those things where it makes, when I think of morality and politics, I think of politicians going towards, waiting on and praying on it, and coming to some sort of decision, which could be valid, for someone who's of faith in certain situations. But I don't know if the general public likes that type of answer.
I can already tell you they probably don't, especially
Yeah.
especially if we're going to attach a kind of religious slant to it. We saw a very big demonstration of just trying to govern using that kind of, I guess you could say impetus from the late 80s, early 90s moral satanic panic. I think a lot of you guys probably are old enough to remember that. I was vaguely old enough to remember. I remember it in a lot of passing and, just in kind of a cursory context, but just thinking of how the GOP, or what used to, what was the GOP at that time, basically was highly, highly, I guess, evangelical in practice. And what this led to was they would oftentimes, a lot of things in entertainment, a lot of content, they wanted censored, basically, broad brush censored under the whole think of the children and just the morality of everything. And, I think that when we tend to get into moral policing, situations where we're trying to apply a subjective morality, either derived via religion, early raising, or just some sort of, even now, scientific context, and we try to ascribe a greater morality to that, you open yourself up to situations where you see abuse of power, control of individuals, or at least attempts to control individuals, and it oftentimes just goes left in some of the most spectacularly awful ways.
Right. Right. And then I kind of feel like it comes down to, well, whose moral compass are we leaning
That's
towards?
true.
One man's moral compass is a different man's moral compass.
That's true.
Me as a Christian, I have a certain set of boundaries that I'm trying to live my life. But for someone else, those boundaries don't exist, and they're perfectly fine with that.
Right.
And to them, it's amoral to limit someone's boundaries, right? Where take uh, we take pride in being able to live within those boundaries. Um, Shemeka, did you want to add something?
No, I was just gonna say I agree with what you said. I don't have an issue with someone having their beliefs, but when they try to say I have to live by those standards when it comes to belief, then I have an issue with that. So I would say we saw a lot of that with the last president, President Trump. A lot of people would say, "Oh, well, he's had three wives." For me, that I didn't care because I was looking for a president, not a pastor. So I think when it
Right.
depends on exactly what we're talking about, whereas I feel like sometimes that is not an issue. I didn't care really what he believed in the sense of can you get divorced and get remarried, or can you cheat on your wife, or can you grab him by the pussy. I didn't care about any of that. I wanted to know what policies are you going to put in place that's going to benefit me and my family, first of all, and that's going to then be beneficial for America. That's what mattered to me. Whereas I know I saw a lot of people who wanted him to live by their moral compass and what they believed. And it's like, okay, you may believe divorce is a sin. You may believe that adultery is a sin and but for him, what if it's not? What if him and Melania got some type of, thing going on where she say, "Hey, you can step out." That's on them. So I truly believe when it comes to certain things that religion or beliefs or morality, it can't be a widespread thing because like you said, what's moral to someone may be different to someone else, and I think we have to respect that. That's why going back to the abortion thing, I don't ever really come at it from a religious aspect. As a black woman, I'll also talk about the fact that we kill more black babies than are born. That has nothing to do with religion. It has everything to do with people are always saying we're minorities. We're only 13% of the population. Where you're killing all the people that could help your numbers go up.
Right. Right.
Hmm.
And you know what? It's even then, that's not even like they justify abortion in some cases with a moral position as well, such as, oh, hey, we don't want to bring this baby into the world where we can't care for it, so it's just better off that he doesn't suffer because that's some kind of twisted morality. He or she does not suffer, and that should tell you just right there, morality is a very very slippery slope that you can get into. And I think you hit on something real important when you started to talk about President Trump, where he had been divorced. That's something that we really started to talk about was what is befitting of the office of president. And then when you start getting into the morality of who can hold a position based on who has a moral high ground, you start getting these characters who have terrible policies, terrible ideas, and just terrible personal lives, and that actually affects their ability to do the job. But they've curated this moral image and this moral positioning to a point where they can manipulate themselves to get into the office just because the other guy doesn't fit the moral, you know, doesn't fit into that little moral box you created.
Right, right. Let me just interject for a second. Shamika, I know you're very limited on time with us. So before you go, if you want to just tell people how they can find you, learn more about you.
If they, I'm sorry, go to shamikamichelle.com. You find me there. You can find me anywhere. Also, you can catch me on Fearless with Jason Whitlock a few nights a week at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, or on Blaze TV if you subscribe to that, and the podcast as well. And I'm going to stick around for just a couple more minutes, but I will have to dip off shortly.
Okay, no problem. And once again, I'm a big fan of yours. I really appreciate you coming on, even just for the short period of time. So thank you again.
Thank you for having me.
My pleasure. Actually, let's go to Ginny. I know Ginny's been pretty silent. I wanted to make sure we used up Shemeka as much as we could before she had to sign off. But Ginny, tell me what you think.
So I agree with you guys a lot. I think that there comes a point where we need to maybe, since everybody's morals can be so different, I think that we just need to stick to the constitutionalism more. I think a lot of people get so caught up in what they think is right that we stop, we forget that we gotta hold ourselves to the Constitution. And I think a lot of people in our government right now are just so focused on what they think is right that they're telling all of us what's right when really the Constitution is what's right. And everything that's going on in our government right now is antithetical to what the Constitution says. And I think whereas it's good that everybody have their own moral compasses and we're all going to have our own ideas of what's good and bad, and it's good for everybody to have their religions, but we have to also remember that the Constitution exists for a reason. The founders created it so that this type of control would not get this far, and hopefully no further than it's getting.
Yeah, yeah, I think I kind of feel like even if let's say you're, I'll just use Republican, let's say you're a Republican legislator and you do have these moral frameworks that you feel is right or wrong, I think as a strategy, you should not lead with it kind of like on a public manner. I would try to find a way where, let's say, constitutionally, it supports what the outcome that you actually want. So, like as Shemeka said, you may think abortion is immoral, but instead of making the moral judgment as to why this is wrong, find the constitutional judgment as to why it's wrong. And I think that a lot of politicians who are Christians, I don't want to say a lot, but there are a number of politicians who are Christians that I've seen where they don't do that. And then what ends up happening is their religion becomes used as a punching bag, right? Because then it becomes these Christians are trying to do certain things rather than X legislator is trying to do something. Um, and and I think that's one of those flawed moves that happens when it comes to, just to use the example of abortion. It becomes an attack on the religion, and then the religion uh, starts to become tainted as these moral arbiters for American society as to what they can and can't do, when there is supposed to be somewhat of a separation between church and state um, in some framework. So, um, Flex, do you have anything to say about that, or is he might be in transit? Ginny, what do you think about what I just said?
I completely agree with you. So I'm consider myself very Christian. My faith is very important to me personally, but I think it's important to separate it, like you were just talking about. If you're going to lead a group of people who all have different religions, who all have different beliefs and moral codes, then you have to always turn back to the Constitution. And I'm very, very pro-life. Anybody who follows me knows that. But I come at it more from the right to life angle more than God says this is a sin. God says this is a sin, because that's not going to change any minds, one. And it's not my
All right.
position to go tell people, you know, what they should and shouldn't believe. I feel like it would be a better use of everybody's time in DC, and I live in DC, so I see these people and how they are, would be to just, here's what the Constitution says, and it's pretty self-interpretable as far as I can see. It's just people don't look at that. It's more, this is what I believe to be right. And now we have a lot of things going on in the country where the wrong thing is happening because a very small group of people are telling us that it's right. I don't know if everybody saw that the CEO of Pfizer is trying to criminalize people for
Oh
quote
yeah.
unquote misinformation about the vaccine. As if, we can't all see that he has something to lose if people are talking bad about the vaccine. That's his personal, and it's probably not a moral thing. He just wants more money.
Now I
Um,
think it's more he
so
saved lives, right? He saved lives with
Well,
vaccine. We're preventing him from saving lives right now.
well, yeah, my question is how are the COVID cases higher with more vaccinations? But I think that people just, especially in DC, need to take the personal out of the professional, and I don't see that happening very much.
Hmm. Yeah, I agree with you there. And you know what? The moral part actually brings us to this woke religion that we don't really want to call religion, but it is a moral framework as to what we need to do on a constant basis to be morally righteous when it comes to creating aspects of equality, and or actually it's more so of equity, and forcing things to occur. Um, and if you don't subscribe to what they're trying to do, then you are being immoral. Or the phrase for the immoral when it comes to the woke is being a white supremacist, right? So it's almost like how a Christian might say, you're being devilish. To them, it's you're being a white supremacist. Um, it is the antithesis of being a moral person. If you are a moral person, you will subscribe to the narrative that they're trying to set as to what can and what should and should not happen. But a lot of the ways, the woke movement, it's it's religious like. It's definitely ideological. It's a constantly changing ideology, where it seems like every week there's a slightly different rule. So it doesn't have a solid base,
Yeah.
which makes it harder to try and call it, a solid religion, but it does have a moral base. And I'm noticing more and more that a lot of things are happening uh, from a moral standpoint. We need to do this because it is the right thing to do. You hear people say, kind of like oddly egotistically, I want to be on the right side of history, right? That's a moral standpoint. I want to make sure that in history, I am the morally just person
Then that
that
means you
shows
don't
up in the
lose.
history books.
I was just about to
Was
say
that?
that means you don't lose any battles then, because all known human history is just a retelling of a story as by the victor. So
Right.
that's kind of how they're approaching it right now. But I do want to say though, just on that context, their morality has a loose framework and basis, but a lot of it boils down to might makes right. However they control the
Hmm.
discourse, however they shift in order to use what would normally be a crucifix as a cudgel, that is where their morality lies. If it confers any sort of advantage over opposition or gives them any kind of mandate to make a broad sweeping generalization that gives them power, that's where their morality is.
Excuse me. Yeah, in a lot of ways, it's kind of like how I always see it is the ends justify the means, right? So if the objective is to have this occur, it doesn't matter if you dox people, terrorize people, harass people, threaten people, like all of those things in between don't really matter. It doesn't even touch on the moral aspect that they believe that they have. They think they're the morally righteous. Um, in that mindset of being morally right. But it doesn't matter as long as the ends justify. The ends always justify the means, um, and that's where, for me, I'm kind of like, man, you guys come off as the morally righteous people, yet you do so many things that are immoral. I mean, just from a Western standpoint, you know, it's not good if you do certain things. Most people would agree, yet and they would generally agree if it's not surrounding their objective, right? So, for example, if I was to dox a leftist, right, they would scream their head off because how dare you do such a thing? But if they were to dox me because I don't subscribe to their ideology, then I'm doing something that's wrong and moral. right? So they have this constant hypocrisy when it comes to what is morally right, how they apply morality when it comes to politics or their personal life or anything like that. So it's definitely strange and inconsistent. Jenny, did you want to add?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that, and you're never absolved. Like with the religion of wokeism, you're never absolved of anything. I don't know if y'all seen, they had their whole, everybody that's white has to apologize for being white because how dare you be born that color? And it doesn't matter though how many times people apologize or in their world, repent of their sins, that
Mhm.
they're never absolved of any of those. So it's a weird religion where if you're always guilty, and if you're innocent, you're always innocent. So if you're innocent, then you can do no wrong, and if you're guilty, you can do no good. And it's just a very strange. It is a religion because I think a lot of people are latching onto it, and people that don't have any other sort of religion, and it is kind of like a cult mentality thing, and it's very dangerous.
Yeah, and what's interesting is if you were to talk to a lot of leftists, they would probably either consider themselves agnostic or atheists, which is funny to me because a lot of what they believe in and the mindset that they have is much of someone who is strong in some sort of religious like ideology. They just don't see the connection, um, and they much rather look at someone who is part of, actually, I don't even want to say organized religion because most of their attacks are on Christianity because they link Christianity with capitalism and all these other things. They probably wouldn't say that about the Muslim faith or maybe the Jewish faith. I don't know. But it is a religious like mindset that they have and moral framework. Um, and it also concerns me. Oh, I'm sorry, Flex, you're going to say something?
No, you actually put it in a great way, and I think a lot of us colloquially use the term zealots without actually realizing what we mean when we, use zealot to refer to them, and frame it in the context of how you would behave in organized religion, where you have individuals who tend to. And I hate to use a Catholic term, but they tend to crusade for their cause. Well, these people literally go out and act like zealots, where they will brand anyone who commits
Yeah,
a
they do.
cardinal offense, and then they signal to everybody else to come attack them, attack their livelihood, attack any and everything. But the core difference between these individuals and what we would call Christians in a modern day sense is that their religion has no room for penance. There's no room for forgiveness. If you apologize, guess what? You only justified your crucifixion. So then it comes at you tenfold. And so
Hmm.
the idea that this is an orthodoxy, I think, is probably the most accurate way to describe what wokeism is. It's it's a secular, non-theistic religion where the individuals at the top, the individuals that basically occupy the highest rungs of government, define and interpolate, and basically interpret what is acceptable, what's not acceptable, based on what they call pragmatism. It's really not pragmatic. Obviously, anything centralized to that degree is not pragmatic, but to the zealots who want to always redefine their position within the orthodoxy, whether or not they're on the bottom rungs, the people with quote unquote perceived privilege, or they're one of the slightly marginalized people, or they're full blown marginalized. They have all of the intersectional check boxes checked off, and they're higher up. They're always seeking to redefine and justify their positioning, and so therein you get people that just one up in their zealotry, where they're more fervent in their attacks on the other, or people that don't basically comport to their idea.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. And actually, I was just thinking about something. So how I was saying, a good strategy for, let's say, a Christian politician is to not lean on the Christianity part and go towards the legislative part, or the constitutional aspect. For people who, we would call woke, they lean on the emotional, and it's been very effective. So, when something occurs, they say, well, what about, black trans are getting attacked every day. They're dying every day, right? And it throws people off guard because they're not used to going towards the personal. They're not used to, like, what do you say to that, right? And if you say something towards that, it comes off as very dismissive. It's a very strong tactic that they use. It doesn't matter if the facts disprove what they're saying. It doesn't matter because to them, on the personal level, that is what's ultimately important. And and if someone, like, we'll use COVID for example, uh, you know, if I am someone who says I'm against, mandates,
White don't kill
or I'm
grandma.
questioning, right, right, they go to, you want to kill grandma, or even worse, they say my best friend died of COVID. What do you say to that as a rebuttal, right? Because you come off as you come off as like a heartless person. You say like, yeah, but the stats say,
Yeah,
you
statistics,
know,
right?
they,
Statistics.
yeah, like,
But that,
Ben Shapiro, facts don't care about your feelings, but um, sometimes you have to find some way to navigate around the feelings by acknowledging what they're stating, and almost kind of placating to their emotions while diverting over to the bigger picture, the facts, because it's very anecdotal to say, my cousin died because of COVID, right? And it would be very heartless if I was to say, well, was your cousin healthy? Were they obese? Did they
Mhm.
have
But that
underlying issues?
But
Uh,
therein is
you know,
that's the answer though that you would get if you asked a lot of conservatives, or if you presented that situation to a lot of conservatives. Yeah, you might get a base layer
yeah,
of, oh my God, I'm so sorry. But then when the conversation around that starts to happen, now we're getting a whole lot of questions that, just come off as insensitive to an individual whose whole mindset, whose whole base of understanding of the world around them is based on this subjective morality. And so, facts don't care about your feelings. Well, feelings don't care about your facts. And guess what? A lot more people live by feelings than by fact. So what do you do?
right, right, exactly. Ginny, you were going to say something?
yeah, well, I was just going to say that that was a really good point that you made, saying, feelings don't care about your facts. I think that that's very much how they are. They're just like, my feelings do not care about your facts. And I think Joe Biden said something when he was running for president. He said, truth over facts. And I was like, bro, those are the same thing. Like, those are the same thing. And y'all were talking about, how do you combat these people when they say you're killing grandma? My cousin died. I think that in this day and age, a lot of the people, especially in the woke group, they think that honesty is intolerant, and they think that being truthful is just unempathetic. And it blows my mind, and I know y'all's minds too, because it's just like empathy is actually, that's a good thing. And like being honest, that's true empathy. And you have to be honest with people about why certain things are happening. And people don't want to hear that though. If you're like, were they obese? Like, was there another issue? And they don't want to talk about the facts of anything. They just want you to, I don't know what they want. I think they just want people to cry, which is sad.
Yeah.
It's sad if anybody dies from this, but we have to look at the underlying causes too. And the woke refuses to look at any facts surrounding pretty much anything. And I just think that it's interesting that they don't think that true empathy is empathetic because they don't get it.
Yeah. Narratives are powerful. And when you craft the narrative around just something that a lot of people have an innate propensity to go off of, such as feelings or, just subjectivity that way, then, you got something that's stronger than any truth, any statistic, any study that you can ever present to them. Like I said, narratives are easy to
And you can show
understand.
it to them, like put it in their face. They're still like, well, I don't care.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Well, where do you think this whole phenomenon of quote unquote my truth has came from? The whole term my truth, I've said this multiple times, my truth is a fancy way of saying my opinion. But see, we've taken that in this new moral framework that the left operates by, that politicians have learned to utilize to their advantage. Oddly enough, conservatives haven't, but a lot of liberal politicians have learned to use, is that they can make my truth the only thing that matters. And now when you get somebody who says my truth, you're in that position that Adam just basically talked about, where somebody says, well, my truth is my family members suffered from such and such illness. What am I supposed to say to that? I can't just throw you out a fact sheet or some statistics that say ways to improve the rate of survival. There's nothing to do.
Right, exactly. Like, how do you work around that? And many, unless you're someone who's good at communicating, and not to toot my horn, but I'm pretty good at communicating with people and reading people, which most people aren't, right? They would much rather stay on their side of the line to argue their point instead of doing something that is more strategic. If I'm arguing with someone, or not arguing, because I don't argue with people, if I'm talking to someone and they are coming from an emotional standpoint, the first thing I'm doing is acknowledging what they're saying, right? And I'm speaking in a particular tone. And what I'm trying to do is diffuse their emotional, the emotionality and the topic that we're discussing, because what I want them to see is that I am a moral person because I sympathize with you. And you have to have a level of compassion and try your best to be sincere about it, which I typically am. If I understand where you're coming from, I understand that your grandmother passed away from COVID. I would imagine it's really tough to go through. I understand that's what's going on, but let me ask you, and you said it before, conservatives haven't learned how to use emotion to get what they want, right? Because the emotion signals a morality that's not obvious. So, you can stick with facts and numbers and everything. That's cool. But what you want to do is lace in the emotional aspect to prove a point. So, like, for example, when I wrote my book, I initially wrote it in a very like male, kind of matter of fact way. And it was a female writer who came to me and said, women read books too, and you need to use emotion. And from that point forward, I started thinking like that when it comes to communicating with people, especially about things that are controversial or things that are debatable. And so how I wrote the book was using my personal story along with lacing in a fact here or there to understand the greater point that I'm talking about. And I'm laying all of my emotions out on the table. And I'm actually communicating a relatively traditional and conservative standpoint the same way that someone who is more left-leaning would. It's just that I'm not coming from a left-leaning position. I'm just using their tactic to communicate my point, right? I'm laying out a moral framework that just seems like a personal story, but it is a moral framework. Is this a right thing to do by doing X, Y, and Z? And I think if conservatives learned how to, in a way, like lace their emotions within the facts, or to do it properly and communicate it in a certain way, I think it would be very successful. So if we were to use an example like the lockdowns, if you say lockdowns cause this much economic loss, no one would fucking care.
Nobody does.
But if you say, hey, listen, the lockdowns, what happened was my mother lost her job and she got evicted from her house and she's struggling. And I know a neighbor who's going through the same thing. He couldn't afford his health insurance. Now he's sick and he has hospital bills, right? Use their same tactic of a moral framework, and that's how you change people's minds to get the ultimate objective of what you want.
Dang, bro, I'm ready to donate to that cause, man. Point me out to that neighbor. but
We definitely need to do that. I mean, I don't feel like conservatives do that. I mean, Adam, you were just talking about that, but the conservatives don't. I mean, I think, are and know that we are genuinely more tolerant and accepting and more, I would argue, empathetic. We just know the facts more, and we know how those facts are going to affect people. We know how policies are going to affect people, and that's why we're so against, Biden's policies. And I think that we have to give people the facts and give them these anecdotal stories about how is giving $450,000 to illegal immigrants affecting, American citizens. How is that affecting us? And we have to put it into these stories that people are going to be able to resonate with. And we don't do that enough. You're completely right.
Narratives. Tell me when the last time was that you heard conservatives control any kind of narrative. I'll wait.
I can think of one. Actually, I can think of one.
Oh man.
Critical race theory.
Very true, very true. And you know what? That delivered us that pretty much delivered us Virginia. I'd say that's been probably the only time that you've seen us galvanize to a point where we control the narrative to where we can actually attach a morality. It's like this. If you're about to give somebody a medicine and they're going to die without that medicine, how do you do it? Do you just shove bland pills down their throat? Or do you give them something sweet to drink and tell them, here, take this, and then you give them the pills and they wash it all down together? We've been trying to shove bland pills down people's throats for almost a decade now, and it's gotten us nowhere. We've been on the back foot for ages now. We've basically been in a situation where, we're sitting up here with a handful of the curative, but the left is feeding everybody junk food, but junk food feels good and makes them, it tastes good and it makes them feel good, but it ain't what they need. Now we're sitting up here, the nation's, and this is metaphorically and true, but the nation's obese, out of shape. The arteries and the veins are clogging up. That's the supply chain, because basically we've substituted all of the good stuff, all the stuff that's actually good for you, for things that just feel good, such as id poll, identity politics, all this superfluous representation metrics, intersectionality, diversity and inclusion, and the hard numbers and logistics are gone. And now the nation's here on the verge of death, and we still haven't figured out, okay, maybe people would actually listen to you a little bit if you just inserted, gave them a little something sweet, go along with these hard to swallow pills that we've been trying to force down people's throats. That's the issue that we're dealing with. And that because we can't even get people to accept what what we're trying to push. We turn people off all the time with our messages, like, just thinking about the black community and crime statistics. What's better to say? Dang, man. Black people can commit about 70% of the crime in the nation. We gotta fix our communities, man. We gotta stop doing bad stuff. Or do you say things like, okay, look, we got kids losing their lives on the block. We got people who have nothing to turn to and they feel dejected and hopeless. And some people have no opportunity to, fix their neighborhoods because, again, they have nothing to wake up for, so they turn to crime. And let's go ahead and, put opportunities. Let's go ahead and help these people. That would be the right way to do things. And that's how you start the process to heal. And then you can start attaching a morality to your cause, such as helping people. But instead, we're always blunt force. We basically just go use the hammer to just fix a obvious nail, rather than just saying, okay, how about we do this? How about we split the wood around it a little bit? How about we go at it from a different angle? And so that's the reason why we can't even get to the point where we can attach a morality to our cause.
No, you're right. You're right. And I'm sitting here thinking of like so many different policies that the right likes to talk about that never go the way that they wanted to go, or at least if they're able to get it the way that they want it to go, the narrative is so skewed against them, and they don't approach it in the right way. So, for example, if we were to talk about the southern border, right? The left has been able to frame it as racist white Republicans don't want brown people to come through the border, right? They've made it a race issue, right? And we've yet to make it a morality issue. We've made it an economic issue. We've made it is it right that they come ahead of people who are doing it the right way? These aren't winning arguments.
Nerd.
How, how you win that argument is what you say is sex trafficking,
Dang.
child sex trafficking.
Man.
You lean on that hard because it's true. That is how you change the narrative. How come the Republicans are the only ones talking about child sex trafficking happening at the southern border? You use those heartstrings to make a point that this is not right from a multitude of ways. But from a moral standpoint, if you tug on the heartstrings of people, they will start to understand what you're talking about. When you see the left saying disband ICE, you make the point that ICE is the number one agency that fights against child sex trafficking.
Yes.
They're the ones making busts all the time throughout this country. And what's been sad is that the left has allowed for the fringe ideology of QAnon to be the child pedophiles are everywhere ideology. And so as soon as someone like myself or all of us makes a rational argument that we should be very mindful of child sex trafficking happening throughout this country, within our neighborhoods and small towns, not even just big cities, they say, "Oh, you're what are you, Q?"
What do you do, man?
I've literally had
plan. You trusting hard, bro. But
yeah,
but that's how they
and
work.
I've had that happen to me when I'm making a legitimate argument, when I'm seeing article after article about U.S. Marshals busting up child sex rings in a variety of states, and that's not good, right? That tells me that there's a bigger issue, because if they're cracking down on these, that means that there's more, right? So whenever there's crime that people are getting caught, that means that there's more crime behind it. They just didn't get caught yet. And I would bet those bigger rings that get caught make the smaller ones change their process and change about how they're doing certain things to be more mindful. So they have to reframe the narrative, and they can't allow the left to constantly use QAnon as or calling them conspiracy theorists. You have to make a real world, heartfelt, moral framework when you talk about any type of policy.
Consider the human cost in everything, basically. Like I said, we divorce it from the human cost. Go ahead, Jenny.
Oh, I was just going to say that we not only need to reframe it, but we also need to mass distribute it. And I feel like, the rights, we're trying. We have these new news companies coming out, and they're trying. But, news sources like Fox News, why don't they talk about this stuff more? The left is constantly making their very emotional, heartstring pulling videos of well, honestly, a lot of them seem like paid actors. But if we did something not like disingenuous like that, but something similar to where people understood the real life effects that these things were having on real people, then it would, I think, change a lot of minds. And I think public opinion is the most important thing in our country moving forward. We have to shift that. We have to turn it away from leftism. And that starts with, not only reframing it, but getting it out to as many people as possible.
See, I'm going.
Right.
Oh, hold on. I'll make one.
No, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I'll make one quick point, though. I'm going to say this, and this is going to probably inflame a lot of tensions, pissing people off. I don't care. Communism is pretty gosh dang successful. If you ask me of a ideology to live by, communism works. Now, it doesn't work for the right reasons. It's never actually been successfully maintained, but the fact that you have an ideology that's killed so many people, ruined nations, and literally inflicted untold amounts of human misery on the world, and yet it always finds a way to pop back up, tells me the people who push it are doing something right. And it's like Jenny just said, you got to mass produce the message. Communists are excellent at going ahead and making people consider the human cost of ideas, the human cost of things. When does the right ever do this? Like, you think about ICE. People are saying defund ICE, but nobody ever considers the fact that ICE stops untold amounts of sex trafficking. You know what would work is if ICE and conservatives, Fox News, if they started showing stories and creating all of this propaganda where you have an ICE agent helping to reunite a child with their family. I know it doesn't happen often, but if you create that iconography, if you create those sorts of images, those things that resonate with people, that would work. Like unemployment. Why are we not sitting up here, creating, and I hate to say this, but shock porn, stuff that just shows like the actual cost of what unemployment does, and then tie that to these deleterious policies that Democrats keep pushing. Why are we not doing that? Oh, that's right. We're just
Well, Boston is too busy covering, Caitlyn Jenner.
yeah, I know. Oh God, don't get me.
I mean,
Ah.
here is turning into Gossip Girl, like XOXO. It's really embarrassing for our side, and I think that we have to wake up more on our side to realize that maybe some of the news organizations that claim to be for us are actually against us. Maybe some of those CEOs have ties to these communist people more than we know, and I think that we just need to start being smarter and if they're not going to fix it, we need to fix it and just be thinking of ways that we can, and this is why we're doing this spaces right now, but mask it out, this new reframing of just like the truth. It's not a reframing of anything other than the truth.
Right. And one thing I will say is, at least from my perspective, I think we are, I don't want to say conservatives, let's just say moderate-minded people. Because realistically, I don't have a problem with a moderate liberal. Um, I have a problem with people who are beyond the moderate, who are leaning on the progressive end, um, when they start diving into identity politics, which the vast majority of them do. If they're like, let's just say like Tulsi Gabbard, I don't have a problem with Tulsi Gabbard because I don't hear her repeating, identity politics, leftist jargon on a consistent basis. I may not agree with her policy positions, but, I'm just making the point that people who are in the middle, I care about those people, whether they're on the left or on the right. I care about those people. And I think new media is catering to the people in the middle. So the perfect example is Joe Rogan. Joe Rogan is a liberal, right? But Joe Rogan is a moderate guy. And he's willing to have conversations with people who are on the right and on the left. And he's willing to expose certain things and talk about certain things that Fox News wouldn't talk about or Fox News wouldn't highlight. And speaking of Fox News, I think Fox News hurts us more than helps us. I think Fox News is an old media that is attempting to be the right CNN. I think that the format of having, let's bring this guy on, quickly, tell us what you think of immigration in 3 minutes. I think that is something that now that new media exists, where we can have an hour-long conversation in detail and discuss things, it just makes it look like Fox News looks like the Model T in a Tesla world.
Old guard media.
And right, it's just old guard media. And when you start really looking at certain things that they're doing, I don't see how beneficial it is. It's and a lot of times it comes off as a punching bag because Fox News has allowed itself to have someone like Bill O'Reilly, who's just a big blowhard, right? And he was antagonistic. They let that guy lead the company for years, and it did them no good. It painted them with a broad brush, and it tainted their image as being these unaffectionate, conservative, just blowhard,
pro-corporate stuff shirt.
Pro-corporate, yeah, just like
fundraiser,
neocon, yeah, and that's where, like, if you have conversations with people, they say you were watching Fox News too long. Meanwhile, I know from talking to conservatives, they barely watch Fox News. Like, people watch Tucker Carlson, and that's basically it. Most people do not sit there. That's why, like, most of their commercials are about, loosening up your bowels, because it's nothing but 80-year-old people who are sitting there watching it all day.
Mm-hmm.
It's old media.
Not to disparage anybody that's in the boomer crowd or anybody there. Obviously, if you guys are listening to the space, you're pretty hip. You're pretty up there with technology, even though you're still on mainline tech. But yeah, that's the key opposition right now to us changing the narrative, changing how we do things. That we still have the old gatekeepers. As long as Tucker
Right,
Carlson does not decide to go on his own and start creating his own decentralized show, you're always going to see a situation where Fox News does become the whipping boy, like you just said, Adam. They're the punching bag. They're I don't even want to say straw man, because they're like the steel man, because there is some veracity to it. There's something behind it, because a lot of people still do watch Fox. But at the same time, it's just a big weakness right now. So,
right.
until we can actually, I think until we can actually bust down a lot of these old power structures, these things that pretty much bogart a lot of conservative thought and opinion and the old way of doing things, we're not going to see any meaningful change in discourse to the right. Like I said, consider it, the right is still almost toxic as it stands to the black community, even though the black community actually has been pushing back a lot on this new wokeist stuff. It's only this newest generation that's really been whole hog embracing it, and some of the default liberals who just don't want to be old fogies. But ask yourself, why are we still losing out to a lot of black support, a lot of support? Well, Latinos have actually probably passed us a little bit when it comes to getting involved in the party. But ask yourself, why is that? It's because we're still operating on the same ROE, or rules of engagement, as set forth by Fox News.
But you know
Right,
what would
right.
be really cool? What if people like Tucker Carlson, these main people that really, oh, that's my dog, y'all. Hello. These main people, like, all came together, left their major networks, and started their own thing.
Been trying to get that to happen. That would be amazing. Honestly, we've seen it. We've seen that it can work. There are a lot of stars that have actually left Fox and left these other areas, like just creator of the Blaze Media. Why do you think Missing Link Media exists? Stuff like that is where we're pretty much heading, and where we need to accelerate towards in order to actually remedy this problem. But that's 110% correct, Jenny. That would save the right in an instant.
Right.
The people that would be leaving these networks are the ones that we'd want on our side anyway. If they all came together and started their own things, which, as you said, will start happening, that will be what saves our side.
Right. So this is, I guess, the portion where we get the audience involved. So that girl, I'm going to add you as a speaker, and you can unmute yourself.
Oh, my
Hello?
bad, because this is the first time I ever did this. Thank you for allowing me to speak. And hello, everybody.
No problem.
But I just want to say a couple of things real quick. Like, I hear what y'all saying about Fox News, but I'm like new to like I've always had my own mind and thinking my own way. But mainstream, I just didn't think everybody else kind of. I can't say I didn't think all black people like thought differently, but I just didn't see it mainstream, and I was getting mainstream news all one-sided from like even my local news is just like all one-sided. And then one day, and then I was told Fox News was racist. I mean, like that, a whole network was racist. Like that's a little crazy to me, but now it's crazy to me, but it worked because I didn't want to watch. I was like, I'm not putting on that channel. That's the craziest thing to me now that I think about it. But then when I did finally start putting it on, and I'm like, well, I'm just getting the facts from here. And I'm not like, yeah, you could tell there's like a bias, but like mostly the facts I am getting from there. So I do still think it's good for at least that for somebody who's like new to like, I don't know. I don't call myself a conservative. I'm definitely an independent, but this kind of free thinking and just being boisterous with it. But and then the last thing I wanted to say was what y'all was saying about like people the communists, how they manipulate with the emotions and everything, and like the laws and stuff or whatever. But anyway, I'm from Philly. So in Philadelphia, they have these new laws coming out, like where they're not checking people's inspection stickers and stuff like that, because everybody was screaming that it was racist. But like, I talk about this stuff, like I do have like this little YouTube or whatever. And I talked about that. I was arrested before, and I did have, inspection stickers that were like expired or whatever. But I never looked at it as like, oh, they just doing it to me because I'm black. Like at the end of the day, we do need these little laws, but I just try to keep it real. Like, yeah, I have been arrested for driving at that moment for driving while black, but I've also been like pulled over for things like a broken tail light, stuff like that. I understand the importance of it. And so I hate when they use race to try to make it seem like it's helping us. But in the end, you might find somebody who got a hammer or something in their car, and you stop them for a tail light, and then you save the life unknowingly. But that's not going to happen anymore. And our murder rate is crazy right now. That's all I wanted to say.
I appreciate you giving your 2 cents. In regards to Fox News, I'm not saying that it's not useful. But what I'm saying is that it shouldn't be the arbiter of right-leaning truth or strategy or anything like that.
The hegemony. They shouldn't, it shouldn't hold a hegemony on conservative thought. But now
Exactly.
Yeah, you're right though. The way I think of it, I think of Fox News kind of as like the Joe Rogan of news networks, which for a lot of people, Joe Rogan is their first foray into listening to podcasts. But what Joe Rogan does is that, you listen to his show and, you listen to it all by itself for a little bit and it's real cool. But then you start discovering the people that go on Rogan and then you start venturing out into more and more of their content. And, it's like you never stay on Joe Rogan by itself. You're always on the Joe Rogan podcast, but then you go and you follow somebody else. Let's say he has somebody that's an expert in MMA. Then he has a doctor. Then he has a health fitness expert. And you start finding your pathway to a lot of other just good content creators through it. So I think you're pretty much right, Casey, as far as how Fox News worked for you. And I think that if it kind of relegated itself more so to that way of operation rather than just existing as, no, you're going to stay here, you're going to get your orthodoxy from Fox News to counter the orthodoxy that they get from CNN, then I think that we might be a lot further along.
Right. And a lot of what you just described was myself. I remember listening to Peter Schiff the first time, and I was like, I've never heard this before, and it makes so much sense what he's saying. And that was one of those people that really woke me up, amongst other people that he had on his podcast. So it's definitely the, excuse my crude language, but the cherry popper when it comes to like free thought and just thinking for yourself and hearing different perspectives and considering all different type of ideologies or just different opinions, and those things help to make us a more round, or make it into like a more well-rounded person. Excuse me. But thank you for giving us your 2 cents. I appreciate you jumping.
Thank you for having me.
No problem. We're gonna go to Shepherd. Shepherd, you should be able to speak.
Hey, peace and love to the room, man. Wow, what an amazing show. Could we get hundreds in the room for all of the hosts of the show?
Thank you.
I'm gonna throw them up too.
Yeah, throw them up, man. Throw them up, man. Love you guys' perspectives. It's great how all four of you were different. And you have different approaches, but you kind of circle back together to knit what you're saying. So I agree with a lot. Let me see where I want to unpack first. So let me unpack what the sister just said. Growing up in Philly and how they have a lot of murders. Well, the murders in my community are similar. And I've been to 40, 50 candlelight vigils That's, if you don't know what that is, that's being on the street corner or on the block where someone was actually murdered, where you bring teddy bears and a pastor speaks and, candles are lit. Um, I've seen in my historic black high school 5 members of the graduating football team murdered and others wounded. So it's a big problem. And it's a problem. I'm in Virginia right now. Very violent here. I've watched the Democrat Party in Virginia say that they're not biased, they're not racist, but they rigged the primary for McCullough, ex-Governor McCullough, so that 2 black women could not run and not win the primary in Virginia. And he lost. And both of those black women who were running for governor were better than him as a candidate. Now, ideology, I'm not speaking on that. I'm just speaking on how the hypocrisy of the Democratic Party. I've seen from January 1st to November 3rd, them run a campaign and ignore the issues in my neighborhood and in neighborhoods across Virginia at the same time. Use all kind of tricks and techniques on urban radio and use influencers to try to get the black vote in the communities that they were indeed ignoring. So that failed. African Americans did not turn out in the numbers that they needed to push the Dems ahead in Virginia, and now we have a Republican, Glenn Youngkin, a Republican governor elect, who is on standby to come in. I watched Glenn Youngkin use CRT as a wedge issue in confluence with trans bathroom assault, a rape of a trans kid pretending to be trans, raped 2 girls in a bathroom after Democrats passed a law that opened up the bathroom, after Democrats um, um, passed a resolution barring notification of assaults and violent crimes and assaults on staff in the school system. After Terry McCullough, the governor, ex-governor who lost, passed resolutions, um, all kind of school resolutions that were
Yep.
very anti-family. So um, he used CRT as a wedge issue. Now, as an African American man and a historian, a follower of the great historians Booker T, W.E.B. Du Bois, uh, uh, everybody who has been inspirational and carried the torch of black literacy, of black professors, of being engaged in the critical theory of race, but not the critical theory of making white people feel inferior for being white. I don't want history to be erased. I want conservatives to find a line in the sand of compromise on the issue of black history, and not let this metastasize into something that is negative towards the 200 years of struggle that African Americans have had just to get history into schools. So that's my feeling on CRT. Don't want to make white people feel guilt, white children feel guilty for being white, but also as a black person who's leaning conservative, I also don't want our 200 years of struggle to even get books in the library, or like Mr. Armstrong, the um his name is not Armstrong, was a black astronaut who is named after a library. He couldn't even get books out of the library. So I don't want this not to be taught. So that's my thoughts on CRT. I think a compromise has to happen pretty soon. Nobody ever wins culture wars. As far as the Democrat black community, you have to understand as a conservative that the boule, which is the culmination of the divine nine, the 1% of the divine nine of fraternities and sororities, they control the black community. They are the gatekeepers in South Carolina primaries when all of a sudden the narrative is that everybody black is definitely going for Biden over Sanders. No, these are rigged primaries. If you see the Boulay or Roland Martin give the questions to the debate to Hillary Clinton,
Boy,
these are rigged Boulay members who are assisting the Democratic Party because like Booker T said, Booker T was actually Boulay as well. If like Booker T said, they want to be the fingers on the hand, and they don't care if they mislead. They're actually called the misleadership class. They don't care if they mislead the black community, and they'll use the church morality, as you were speaking about. They'll use the fraternal organizations and the bonds that you go through crossing the burning sands and the oaths that you take that are conflicting with the oath you take to Christ and Christianity. They'll use Masonic orders. So again, the black community isn't this monolith that you think it is, but it's definitely has some black Judas goats that lead the black community in the wrong direction on many issues. If you look at well, let's take my city for instance. The mayor, the senator, the delegates, the city council, the fire chief, the police chief, the Commonwealth attorney are all fraternity members. And they all came up together. They all advance each other at the expense of the lower caste in the Democratic Party black politic machine. So I'm fighting a war that I'm trying to get conservatives to understand, and it is a morality war. So I'm gonna let it go there because I've spoken a long time. I know other people want to speak, but I'm with you. My last thing I want to say is abortion packs. It's 16,000 kids got aborted in Virginia, 2020. The abortion packs are all run by mass communication experts making about $300,000. When Texas passed the abortion laws, we tried to nationalize the issue here in Virginia because of the governor race, and all these PACs came in. If you go on ProRepublica Explorer and you research these abortion PACs and you look at the money pouring in, you have to understand the abortion isn't about morality. The soldiers carry the crusade, like you said, crusade morality flags. But abortion is about finance and money. These procedures, they show you in ProPublica what the doctors are making, $1 million a year from abortions. If only 16,000 people had abortions out of 9 million people, how is it a $500 million business? Something's wrong here. So that's all I want to say. Thank you for letting me speak.
hey, that's heavy.
Well,
Man, what you got on that,
yeah.
Ginny? What you got?
Can I just say that the abortion industry is like making bank, and that's why they're gonna like probably continue to allow it forever. It's about the money in general for almost everything. Like these people don't care.
Yeah, basically. Just for people who aren't familiar with Ginny, Ginny lives in DC. You know, she's worked very close with politicians and different campaigns, and you know, she's very in tune as to what happens in DC. So when she's speaking, she's also speaking from a very political standpoint. Like she understands the mindset of a lot of these politicians, lobbyists, and the sort. So she's basically seeing the corrupt nature, and she sees the motivation behind a lot of the people that are within the federal government. So just kind of keep that in mind when she's making that point. Yeah, man, you said a lot. When you said Roland Martin is a gatekeeper,
we got some history there, bro. We got some.
It's the absolute truth, and the word boule, it's on point. You know, in my book, I called them the Ivory Tower Black Elite. You know, they are the people who reign on the Ivory Tower, saying that Black people can't achieve certain things because there's a system set up in place. Meanwhile, they've benefited from that system, and we can't reach the heights that they can reach. You know, they always make themselves seem like the outlier, and in actuality, they're the ones who have rigged it. and they participate in rigging it, and they use race as an issue to stay and keep everybody else in line. So, Roland Martin is a perfect example of that. Roland Martin is the type of person who would he'd sell a kidney to get back on CNN. He likes attention, he likes power, he likes being a part of the political establishment. As much as he wants to look at someone like myself, or he was going back and forth with Delano Squires, wants to call him and insinuate that he's a coon. Meanwhile, this guy would kiss the feet of Hillary Clinton if he was dared to give him the chance to do so.
Slobbed the cankles, dog. He slobbed them cankles hard. No lie.
And he's got a big mouth. He could put the whole foot in. So these people exist, and I really like how he brought it into a higher level. Because one of the things I cannot stand is when everybody stays at this lower frequency of looking at the world. That's why I can't stand where people say, "Oh, it's just about race. It's about racism." Like, no, it's not. They use that to manipulate you on a constant basis. The past couple of years, especially since George Floyd, everything has been about race, and the reason being is because it works. It's very manipulative. Most Americans.
She bought a mansion for herself. It pays.
Yes, it pays to talk about race.
That is the rule in DC.
Yes. So you look at just about every policy that has come out since George Floyd, whether it's gone in the favor of the establishment or gone against the favor of the establishment, they have used race as a motivating factor. When they changed the laws in Georgia slightly, to make it more common sense, I remember reading it. I was like, how is this Jim Crow 2.0? Or as our fearless leader, Mr. Biden, likes to say, it's like Jim Eagle. I'm like, how so? How so is this the case? And they use it on a constant basis. It's extremely manipulative, and it's extremely effective. That is the sad part. So some things are about race, but the vast majority of things, especially about politics, are not actually about race. They just use it. They show up every 4 years, typically, and they like to say, oh, it's for Black people. It's for Black people. And then they disappear when actually something comes into play. And they like to dangle reparations and all this other nonsense. And the boule, as he put it, are all behind it. They see zero change within the party. They are well in tune as to what happens. They are the elite, right? And we like to pretend that there are no such thing as a Black elite. There for sure are Black elites.
Oh man, we saw and heard. I was about to say, we saw and heard him get berated by Joe Biden on that call. That call when he just got elected, and they were like, members of the community are getting a little bit worried that they're not seeing the change. And he sat down and berated them and said, "Now I did something for y'all that ain't nobody ever did. I ran on change as a platform, and I never strayed from it." Man even got the clapping when he was talking, berating them. And if you look at that call, that was the Black political elite. Even had Al Sharpton and Jesse Jackson on the call. But to your point, again, that's what I'm saying. Everything is gate kept. We got to break through these gates. We cannot exist in this hierarchical structure where politics has to basically go through these points of entry, and we're sitting up here on the bottom like the plebeians discussing things that never make it to the ears of the elite, that never penetrate that echo chamber. That's why we got, that's why we got to break through it.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, can I say something about it penetrating
the
ears of the elite? They know. I think a lot of them know. From the ones that I know in DC, they know. They just don't care because it doesn't pay. And I just want everybody to understand how much money goes into this. The lobbying, they're beholden to people. And a lot of the people in DC, they put out an image on the media that isn't their true personality. And they have policy beliefs that they don't even truly believe in. And that's for even on the right. Everybody has to be more attuned to, and use more discernment about these people, because you can see it if you look closely.
Right, exactly. I know we have some more people who want to speak, so let's try and get to as many as we can. 1 second.
Go next. Let's go.
Gamayan.
Well, yeah.
Here's.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes, you
All
can.
Loud
right.
and clear.
Hey, guys. So, first of all, thank you so much. I really enjoy listening to you and learning so much, and always fun to listen to you guys. Uh, and man, this cast was on point on like all the important things. Um, and so I want to address a couple of the things that you guys kind of got stuck on. So, I'm actually an immigrant, like a first generation immigrant and an immigration lawyer, legal immigrant, of course. And so, one of the things when the right talks about immigration that uh, I'm surprised they don't get is how much illegal immigration hurts immigrants, both legal and illegal, even just the ones that came before. So,
Mhm.
on a very just basic economic level, the reason, especially even for legal immigration and how we got here on work visas, is they bring in professionals, and of course the uneducated across the border too, but they bring in professionals even legally from just countries where they get paid a lot less, and so they're happy to work here for low salaries that Americans would never, never accept. And then as soon as they've lived here for a while and they get promoted and they, want real salaries, they bring in the next batch of immigrants to replace them, and again, salaries get depressed. And yeah, it's all part of capitalism and understandable, race to the bottom. But if we're going to talk about immigration, a lot of immigrants that you're going to find hate illegal immigration because partly just because it depresses our salaries. And then the other part of it, and that's especially true for people like me who are from former USSR or other oppressive regimes, even people from Latin America. Like the reason we want to come to America is to start, a new life in a better country with a better culture that, we want to assimilate to because we like it, because it's free, it's successful. And then if you get an entire wave of immigrants kind of following after us and establishing little mini, mini Mexicos and mini Guatemalas and mini Moscows. It's like, what the hell did we leave our country for and come to the US? And all the people, you get waves of unfiltered immigration. All the people we came here to get away from, they're all following us here. And sometimes a lot of really bad characters come and they actually like hunt down dissidents. And Russia loves to do this, is to hunt down dissidents who escaped, and they'll get in on immigration visas or on however, and assassins, spies, whatever, gangsters, like really bad dudes, bad hombres, like Trump would say. But and like immigrants do suffer from this, but just just the mass wave of people who just don't know any better. They like the way it was in the old country, and they come here and they set it up like it was in the old country. And we don't begrudge them the old country, but we came here specifically because we didn't want to live there. And if a bunch of people from the old country come in and set up the old country here, A, what the heck did we immigrate here for? And B, there's nowhere else left to run. This is the last stand, as Ronald Reagan said. So it's very near and dear to a lot of immigrants to stop illegal immigration and mass immigration, or at least to pace it so people to have time to assimilate. Because the whole point of immigration is we want to be here and not there. And if there isn't a border, there isn't a difference between the here and the there. So you're hurting immigrants more than helping us. And then another thing I wanted to say is just when we talk about race and critical race theory and its connections to communism, and everybody's like, oh, it's Marxism, just a new Marxism. No, it's not. It's the very old original style of Marxism that was just core to the Soviet Union and the Soviet philosophy. And like there was this concept in the USSR called the Fellowship of Nations, that I'm thinking was just the foundation, the template for what later became the Rainbow Coalition and the alphabet soup, LGBTQIA, TGIF. And the concept of it was that the Soviets were all like, oh, you were oppressed in the Russian Empire. We're going to have this union of it was the slogan was the friendship of nations is when a Pole clasped hands with a Georgian, clasped hands with an Armenian, clasped hands with a Yakut, and there's tons of minorities, especially in the USSR, how much they captured, and they all go together to build a brighter future. But the reality was that there was always one group that was singled out, that was ostracized as the enemy, and it wasn't ever the same one. It was whichever group was most successful, most anti-communist, and most dangerous, and so they were ostracized and vilified. And Stalin was brilliant at this because just like he always got his new inner circle to kill his previous inner circle, elevated them, and then repeated the purge. He did the same thing with entire nations. So, for example, the Holodomor, the the famine in the Ukraine that Stalin orchestrated, and he justified it by making the Ukrainians, the farmers, the kulaks, were the ones who were
They were the evil ones.
they were the ones causing the famine, which of course was utter bull. But as he was starving them to death and forcing them to eat their own children, guess who the officers were that were guarding the barricades, that weren't letting the food through? They were all Jews. They were all us. And so after the Ukrainians saw the Jews were starving them to death, guess who was next? We were next. And the next was the doctor squad and the vicious anti-Semitism, and basically, a second Holocaust. The camps prepared in Siberia that my dad would have been born in if Stalin hadn't died a few months before my dad was born. But of course, the Ukrainians were more than happy, and a bunch of others obviously bought into the propaganda. But the Ukrainians were the happiest of all to go along with killing the Jews. and
Wow.
and the Georgians were next. So this is what CRT is. This is what CRT does just today. It's pitting, the joke in the USSR for Jews was that friendship of nations was when all of these nations, Poles, Armenians, and Georgians, all clasped hands together and jointly went to kill the Jews. And the Georgians, of course, had their own version of that joke, and the Ukrainians as well. And so that's what CRT is. That
Right.
exact same concept just today. And to give you just a single point of how central that idea of friendship of nations was to communist philosophy, it's in the frickin' Soviet national anthem. So this isn't something new. This is something very old and very deadly, and this is what they do. So we need to address it as such. And the way to address it always was things that unified us across racial lines. Things like our religion, nationalism. We are all one country. We're all, and so all of these binding ideologies are exactly what the left destroys. That's why they're so anti-religion. That's why they're so anti-nationalism, and they equate all nationalism to Nazism. And if you listen to Yuri Bezmenov, I don't know if you heard of him, but in his lecture, he actually goes through all these bonding elements of society that Marxist propaganda is designed to destroy. But basically, like if you're saying, where is our moral foundation? That was our moral foundation. That nationalism and faith and other, sources of unity that the left doesn't let us talk about, because they instantly say, "Oh, you want to talk about religion? You must be a zealot. You must be, the religious right, whatever the heck they say that is nowadays. And you want to talk about nationalism? You must be a Nazi. So we got to push back on that, and we got to realize that this is all old and well worn and well documented, and we have to fight it as such, not say,
Okay.
this is something new, this is something old and deadly. All right, that's pretty much all I had to say.
Thank you,
All right.
gentlemen. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, there's a lot to touch on there. I mean, he's right. This is a very old framework. He did a good job as far as explaining coming from the communist country, the USSR. But essentially, it's a method of dividing and conquering a nation, and people, certain people are able to keep control of the nation and dictate how it moves about. So even in a communist country, there's always someone who's at top.
Right.
So
Exactly it.
Flex.
Can I add something?
Go ahead, Jenny. Sorry, I couldn't hear you there.
Oh, I just wanted to say that you remember when everybody used to be like, how did the people in 1930s Germany do it? Like, how did they buy into it? I mean, things like CRT is how. I mean, it's just turning a group of people against another group of people, and it's scary how many people, right now, I mean, now we know.
It's a he's right. Everybody's right. This is a ideology that's as old as time. It was pioneered. Really, one of the core tenets of just power, just seizing power, was pioneered by Vladimir Lenin, who he always fashioned his vanguard, which would be the most marginalized group at the time, into starting what was an eternal revolution. So it would always be a revolution against somebody. You unify the most stratified portions of your society against the most productive portions. And then the people in the middle, they have to fall in line somewhere. But normally the middle always breaks down and you push people to the edges of the fringes, either those that are doing the terminating or the terminatees. And so again, we're seeing that critical race theory is an excellent vector for that sort of methodology of just destroying and rotting out the framework. Remove the unifying factors, create an other that you can attack, and then go ahead and take the people that feel maligned and play on their vices, play on just their strife, how drum it up, drill up their pain, make them feel really bad, and then you take them out. And that's the importation of immigrants. You create more and more classes each and every time to just repeat this. When immigrants come in and they live in substandard conditions because they're not the visa holders, and then they start to vote against those that actually came in the right way, and then it's always a repeating process. And he's right. This is something we've got to stop, and we've got to stop it on the basis of unification of people along racial lines. We can't just harp on the racial aspects of it anymore. This time we've got to really create our own morality and something that's going to hold together. Otherwise, we're just going to repeat the cycle.
Right, exactly. So I'm going to take Fantastic Automatic in just a second, but I wanted to just throw in these conversations that we're having. It's something that I'm trying to do as often as possible, at least once a week. I'm aiming for it to be every Wednesday about 7:30 with just different people that we're just having a particular topic. So like today, we're talking about morality and politics, see where it leads us. It can veer away wherever it goes. We just want it to be a natural conversation. So if you're enjoying this conversation next week, there actually for the next 2 weeks, Wednesday, 7:30, I have different people that I'm going to be having a conversation with about a variety of topics. So it's not just political. One of the topics we'll be talking about in a couple of weeks is about love in modern society, and just seeing where it leads us. So I just wanted to throw that in. I'm going to add Fantastic Automatic just a second here, which is an awesome name. All right, you can unmute yourself. There you go.
Okay, can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So to start off, I'm assuming I'm probably one of the few or maybe the only left-leaning person in the space right now. I would say I'm kind of center left. more than
Okay.
anything. But I like going into conversations that, you know, challenge my thinking and give me perspectives on. So just a few points I want to make as I was listening to yourselves, the host and the other speakers is, you know, you guys were talking about Fox News and news sources. I highly recommend to anybody that will listen to me to diversify where they get their information from. And even if it's the same piece of information, I feel that it helps people make more informed opinions, and even if it, you know, you're looking for an opinion that fits your ideology, that you could get more educated on that period if you diversify your sources of information. And I don't particularly watch cable news because I think most of it is like infotainment. It's not really meant to inform. But I do listen to some radio shows. I do podcasts, and I, you know, read articles and do stuff like that. And I also engage with different people across the political and ideological spectrum on social media. So I just want to say that for that portion of it. When we were talking about earlier, when I was listening, you guys were talking about feelings versus facts, essentially, and putting morality on policy. And just from my observations I've made over the years, I personally feel that conservatives have had a habit of removing the person or the humanity behind either the person or the policy. Facts are great. And again, people can find facts to fit their own narratives. But I think facts need to be, when you're speaking to people, other human beings with different perspectives, different life experiences, different ethnic, racial, religious backgrounds, different just different people, you do have to include the fact that there is another human being that has emotion, that has feelings, when you're speaking to them about facts. So what I see that is deficient, specifically in the Black community, is that a lot of conservatives just throw statistics at Black people that essentially turn into Black people are bad. You guys commit crime. Here's this FBI statistic. You have no fathers in the home. You don't do this. You don't do that. You're broke, poor. Your cities are trash. Like, you're just terrible. That's what it literally translates into, hearing that. And you know, Black people weren't born out the womb wanting to be criminals. We weren't born wanting to be live in a trash city. We weren't born wanting to be statistics. So when you can't also say, okay, what you guys are suffering from these, I would say, dysfunctionality, if you want to call it that. Like, here's things that happen, why these are policies that can help you, and we understand how you feel about that. I was speaking to someone else on Twitter, and we were talking about Virginia and Glenn Youngkin being able to win over Virginians, over McAuliffe. And if you kind of look at it, when people kind of broke down that campaign, you will see Glenn Youngkin spoke to people and address their humanness, like their concerns, like, you're afraid your children are being indoctrinated in, you know, the CRT stuff. you fear for their education because of the school lockdowns. Well, anybody wants their child to be educated. All parents are worried across all spectrums about their children's education, from Becky in the suburbs to Trina in the hood, but they might have different reasons why they're worried about their children. And so if the message can be crafted to say, okay, I'm speaking to another human being that has the same concerns as this other human being, and they have feelings and there's emotions attached to them, I can say, I understand how you're feeling about this or why you have this concern. It's valid, but let me tell you how I can help fix it, instead of just, well, here are the facts. Throw statistics at people. And it gives a perception. And I think that's why, like, even in, I would say, kind of minority communities, it gives the perspective, the perception that conservatives are cold, unfeeling, just very rigid, black and white. And I don't mean that racially. I mean, it's just like, it's this way or no way. We're talking about CRT. Well, Black people have a concern now with this CRT stuff, that our history, actual facts that happen, is going to be erased. And we actually had to fight for years to even get this stuff included. I'm in Georgia. Children down here learn lost cause history. So now it's kind of like, we're talking about CRT, but when we're talking about people want to ban books, or get a list of names of children that are checking out certain books so they can kind of contact their parents, like stuff like that. Now you're talking about feelings, because people are going to have a reaction to that. And I would be dishonest if I say both sides don't deal with identity politics or grievance politics. Like, they all do that. Everybody has their elite. Everybody has their elite. Everybody has their gatekeeper, that want things to be a certain way to benefit them, and us plebes at the bottom are kind of under their foot, and they want to keep us there. But I just think that, even though I don't share a lot of the same ideological perspectives as conservatives, I'm almost politically fluid. Like, I can agree to certain policies that I think are good and should be implemented and might benefit. Like, I could vote for a Republican, no problem, if I felt like what they were talking about would be good for my community or the nation as a whole or whatever. So, when we talk about the left, the left has their own issues. Like, even within the left, like people, kind of us moderate liberals, we're dealing with a progressive wing that's kind of like out of control. And we're kind of like trying to beat it back. I mean, we get successes when we lose here, whatever. But we see this happening within the party ourselves, and we see it's detrimental. But those polars, those far regions are kind of closing in on us in the middle. And I say everybody, from the right of the spectrum to the left. I have a saying that sometimes you can go so far left, you end up on the right. But,
that's true.
They're closing in on all of us. And what I see now in this country, which is kind of, because I have young children, I see that happening, and it's kind of like we're getting crushed here in the middle by all this, and also being torn apart by it. And like, I think Flex said, or Adam, you said that, we're going to be forced to choose a side eventually. I don't want that to happen. I think diversity of opinion, diversity of politics is a good thing. I think a little push back and forth is a good thing. But what I'm seeing now that worries me is this polarization, and those extremes are becoming louder and more powerful. And I don't know the answer to this, but I wish there was a way that us kind of those moderate people in the middle, even on both sides, could like push those back. And I think a lot of that has to do with the media, like old media. Like I think the Fox Newses, and I'm gonna say Tucker Carlson and CNN, Don Lemon. Like I don't watch any of that because I think they're purposely creating this for their own benefit, and that way they can, if you know, as long as you're afraid and scared and you hate other people, you remain in these people's grasp, and they can pull you apart to these two sides. So what I want to say to everybody is just be very wary of that. Be very cognizant of it. Like just see that, yeah, we have differences and yeah, all these things are going on, but there are forces that are literally trying to, on all sides, trying to tear us apart. That worries me. It scares me. It worries me because, you know, I think America's a great country. I am proud to be an American. You know, everybody says liberals hate America, blah, blah, blah. I will criticize the country. I mean, I criticize my family members. Like, if they're doing something I don't like that doesn't mean I don't love them. That doesn't mean, you know, I don't want to be part of them.
Right.
Say.
Well, I appreciate everything that you just stated. You know, it's funny because I don't think there's anything that you said that I didn't agree with. And I guess I am ideologically slightly to the right of you. Um, so don't think that we are that far apart, to be honest with you. You know, I'm just to kind of give a background about myself. I'm a former liberal, you know, self-identified as a liberal Democrat, and I am now politically independent. Um, I would be I would be a Republican if I trusted the Republican Party. I don't trust any of the political parties, to be honest with you. And I actually think that's a good thing. I think blind loyalty to a party makes no sense. You know, you want politicians to earn your vote, earn your trust, and it makes no sense to just willingly throw away your power and just blindly vote for whoever just because they have a letter next to their name. So that's where I personally stand to date. You know, that's where I lean on as far as how I view politics. So I try to look at certain things from a certain framework, like an independent mind, but I do tend to veer to the right. You know, I am labeled as a conservative, but you know, in some ways, I'm kind of a libertarian. But I question everything. I question everything. I think you're absolutely right when it comes to conservatives leaning too heavy on feelings. I'm sorry, leaning too heavy on facts instead of talking about the emotionality of it, especially when you talk about Black Americans. I think it's been a flaw of a lot of, if you want to just call them Black conservatives, where they've been very matter of fact, too factual, and unemotional when it comes to certain things that are happening in certain Black areas and certain topics. So, you know, it's one of those things where if anybody reads anything that I write, you know, the articles that I write, or even in my book, I'm very emotional, but I lace it around facts. And I'm that way because I want people to understand that I actually care. I'm not trying to be manipulative, but I know that I have to talk about it in a particular way to get my message across. And I think it's been one of the flaws of the Republicans to just basically succeed big cities, succeed, you know, any effort in Democrat strongholds and not try. And not try to win the Black vote because it appears like a huge uphill battle. You know, from a logical standpoint, I get it. Why would you invest a bunch of money to win over people who are voting 80+% for one particular party, when you could, target, let's say, Hispanics who might vote closer to 50%. I'm just making up numbers, but it's been the failure of the Republican Party to not try to chip away at that number, to not reach out, to not explain to them as to why you should vote for them. And I think it's been good, like the last cycle where there were more Black Republicans who were trying to target these areas that Republicans traditionally don't go into. So if you look at like someone like Kimberly Klacik, who didn't win, but she was able to bring awareness, and she's still trying to advocate for Baltimore. And it's those types of things that has been the blind spot when it comes to the right. They've been unemotional. They've been strategically risk adverse. And from a Black person's perspective, it comes off as they don't even care enough to try. So I understand that perspective. I understand that. And I think a lot of maybe new conservatives, I guess you would call myself a new conservative, understand that too. And we are trying to change that perception, I guess. I don't want to talk too much. Flex, you wanna chime in?
Well, nah, I mean, honestly, there's not a whole lot else to add, because I mean, she's where a lot of us are. A lot of us are, by virtue of not being on the far left, relegated to being considered right wing, even though there's a whole far spectrum of where we exist. If I asked a leftist who you were, fantastic, they will probably call you a right winger. In all honesty, you'd probably be lumped right on in the gulags with us. So I say that to say that, again, don't think just because you call yourself a liberal that there isn't, that you're automatically not along with us, just because, again, we're all fighting for the same thing, which is to preserve the country. We just see it a little bit differently. And therein, we can find some interplay. We can find ways to agree with each other, and commonalities, which, just happen to deal with the success of the nation as a whole. So honestly, you guys are a dying breed. True liberals, blue dog Democrats, business Dems. Again, that's just something that's kind of going the way of the dodo, as we're constantly subjected to this whole Weimar Germany effect, where the center breaks down and the fringes grow more powerful until you become unable to govern. So again, happy to have you on board. Thank you. And we are, like I said, I think we're closer and more alike than you think. Got anything for us, Jenny?
All right, Jenny. Jenny, did you want to add anything?
Well, I just want to say that I agree with you, and I think that we do, like y'all were saying, we have more in common than we know, and I think a lot of people are going to start registering as independent. I have been registered independent forever, but I think a lot more people are going to start registering independent because people don't want to choose between these extremes. I mean, I can't align with the Republican Party anymore. At a federal level, they're no different than, the Democrats to me, and I think people are talking about a uniparty in DC, and I think it just really is getting to that point. And it's weird that we're being separated so much in the country, but in DC, at the center of it all, they're all on the same team. So I think if we all register independent and we think for ourselves and we send the message that we owe nothing to these parties, and that we can look at all the facts ourselves, get the news, how you said it, at other sources and on podcasts, and read articles ourselves, I think it's vital that we get the information ourselves and not rely on pundits and these newscast people, and just really go in at it for ourselves, because everybody has the ability and you have the mind and you can do it.
Absolutely. Fantastic. Thank you for giving us your 2 cents. We appreciate it. I'll go ahead and remove you. 1 second here. No justice, no freedom. I'm going to add you as a speaker. And you can unmute yourself.
All right, can you hear me?
Yes.
All right, thank you for having me in your space. This is actually a great space.
Thank
yes,
you.
sir. Although I think your title, Morality in Politics, there is no morality in politics. It's power in politics. Politics is war without bloodshed. And I think it was interesting that there was a focus on the left being some sort of a cult, when the truth is the left and the right are both cults now. Because Biden has become the god of the woke mob, and Trump has become the god of Trump Nation. So, and I want to address specifically, for me, respectfully, I'm black first, so I want to address Black America. Just speaking as a citizen. First of all, neither party, it is not strategically intelligent for any Black American to vote along party lines. It's not intelligent for them to vote along color lines. It's intelligent for them to vote on what have you done for myself and on my community lately lines. And what's happened since we've gained the right to vote, or since we were given so-called the right to vote, is we've allowed ourselves to become political footballs instead of being political weapons, right? And I disagree wholeheartedly with Ginny and Adam. I think race absolutely, because there is only power in politics. It is absolutely important that we talk about race, because we're being punted around like a football. Part of that is not by choice. Part of it is by choice. We need to be political weapons. And what typically happens every election cycle, especially on the federal level, is you've got white politicians who assume they're going to get the white vote. They come into poor Black neighborhoods, lie to these poor Black folks in these neighborhoods. And then you have many Black politicians typically go into these white neighborhoods, assuming the Black vote. They sell us out. And so the result is, at the end of the day, we just get our can kicked down the road like we always do. Nothing really gets done meaningful for Black communities, right? And I want to touch on a couple things. So I'll go with Jenny the co-host. She brought up Black Lives Matter. You are very correct. One thing we don't agree on hardly anything you've commented on so far. We do agree on one thing, that it is a damn shame that those young ladies use that movement to become millionaires. But I will say it started off as a Black liberation movement. And the reason they did that was because we, the Black community, allowed that movement to be hijacked by white America. We allowed it to be hijacked by the LGBTQIA plus community. And the result is we received absolutely nothing meaningful from that movement. So, and then I'll address, Jenny, you've mentioned CRT a couple times. I'll say this with CRT, a lot of folks in the space have been kind of tap dancing around it. I'll just get to the point. I love CRT. I don't like the way they branded it, because we all know that white folks don't like to be criticized, but I love it. And the reason the majority of white Americans are upset about CRT, and it is the majority of the folks who are upset are white Americans, is because it's truth telling. They don't want to view life through a mirror. They want to look at life through a window, right? And they don't like the truth of our ugly history, right? So, and then I'll address something else. We keep talking about, one side plays the race card, one side doesn't. No, both sides play the race card. Adam, you brought up reparations. I'm a huge proponent of justice in the form of reparations for my ancestors who were slaves, right? I know for a fact that my ancestors were slaves, right? Yes, you have that dumbass Joe Biden who brought up this nonsense about giving a reparation or giving money to these illegal immigrants. But you also had Donald Trump, the right God, the Republican Party God, who stood up at an RNC convention no more than a few months ago and literally demanded that China give us $20 trillion in reparations. He used the word reparations because of the so-called deaths that they supposedly caused, due to COVID. Not to mention the fact that he used the same corny tactics that have been used, since this country was founded, of having a bunch of Black preachers get up behind him and pray for him as though he really supported Black folks. He used historically Black colleges. He propped that up to make it seem like they care about us. And the truth of the matter is that neither political party was built for us. We need to focus on the politics in our own communities. We need to devote the majority of our resources and our time and our vote to local and county government. I didn't say ignore the federal vote altogether, but it's a waste of time. There's one thing worse than taking away a man or woman's right to vote, and that is crushing one's inspiration to vote because they don't feel like they have anything to vote for, right? So I know you say you live in D.C., Ginny, and I don't know you personally, so I'm not going to attack you. On top of that, this is your space, so I'm going to respect it. But I'm in touch with reality. I'm in touch with boots on the ground in one of the poorest black neighborhoods in all of Texas, born and raised there, right? And I can tell you that the masses of folks don't give a damn about what's going on with your party, Adam. They don't give a damn about what's going on with your party, Jenny. They give a damn about real shit that they're dealing with on a day-to-day basis that neither party cares about. All this is the power struggle at the top between wealthy elites and the white man in America. And I want to be clear. When I say the white man in America, when our organization says the white man in America, we understand it's not just white men. It's Joe Biden, it's Donald Trump, it's Larry Elder, it's Candace Owens, it's Cory Booker, it's the white and black elites. So there is no morality in politics. It's all a power struggle. And I think that as black Americans, we need to, if we do choose to vote, we need to be more intelligent about how we vote. We should not identify with a party. We shouldn't identify with left or right. We shouldn't even identify with the political candidate. We should identify with issues that affect ourselves and our community. And to be candid and respectfully, strategically speaking, we should have zero concern about other groups in this nation right now. Only be concerned about black America in the short term. Notice I didn't say forever. I just said in the short term. And that's all I got. I will say this, it infuriates me, and I do see how they use, race as a weapon, right? And it is unfortunate, but it infuriates me when black folks and white folks say there's nothing to see here, just move on. I'll give you an example and then I'll close because I don't want to take up too much time in your space. You won't hear one white American today that has the courage to admit that he or she is a racist. They all say one or two things. No, I'm not racist. I'm different. I'm not like that. Or I'm a patriot. And I don't give a damn about facts or figures because those are easily manipulated. Experience and common sense is much less easily manipulated than facts and figures. And I can tell you from experience that I know racism still exists. It is deeply rooted in this political system that we have here. And when many of those white folks say I'm an American patriot, common black folks, we know what that code word, we know what that means. So, but at any rate, I do enjoy the space. I like the fact that many of us are thinking for ourselves, and I do thank you for hosting the space.
Thank you. I appreciate you giving us your perspective. I agree with you on some things. Being politically independent, I think is the best route, regardless if you're black, whatever your nationality is, because you made a good point as far as race, especially towards black people. Race is used as a political football, right? And especially, I don't know, maybe, no, I don't think I was oblivious to it, but it seems even more heavy-handed since the death of George Floyd, where for everything that happens, like, for example, Pete Buttigieg standing on the podium and answering April Ryan's question about addressing the racist history towards highways. And so they're going to use race as a reason to flood in more money that we don't have and increase inflation. And they're going to do that in the name of black people. And it's something that, we're not even able to talk about certain policies because race gets used as a motivating factor. And if you question those policies, they've weaponized black people against those policies. So if you're against that policy that they say is for black people and you question it, then you are against black people. and they've used Black people on a consistent basis. It's extremely manipulative from a political standpoint. And to kind of go back to what I said earlier, what I meant by it's not necessarily about race. What I was saying is, I also said after that, some things are about race. So I'm not oblivious, and I don't think there's not a person who's on the political right that I've ever talked to where they wouldn't acknowledge that, yeah, there's some racist people that exist. And most of the racist type of things that we talk about is the bigotry of low expectations. It's the things where they want to quote unquote help us by lowering standards, by insinuating that we can't do stuff, that we're unable to do stuff, and that they're going to help us by doing it for us. It's that type of thing that we really talk about. But I also talk about how they ignore us in things that actually matter, and they make us hyper focus on the federal government. Meanwhile, the local government is incredibly corrupt. In my book, I use Baltimore as an example because it's the most obvious example. A city that is Black dominated is incredibly corrupt, and yet no one does anything about it. In the city of Detroit, it's Black dominated, and the largest employer in Detroit is the Board of Ed. It's incredibly bloated with administrators, and no one does anything about it. Meanwhile, those kids in a majority Black city suffer because of it, and no one is willing to do anything about it locally. And they use race in a lot of those ways to pigeonhole and stay in power. So, there are some things, obviously we're coming from a different angle, but I think even though we're coming from a different angle, we want similar outcomes. So I'm all about finding some sort of commonality with people. And so I don't want you to think that we don't have that kind of same commonality. I think there may be some misunderstandings, and admittedly some bad messaging that comes from the right when trying to communicate to the masses. And I also think that there is a lot of people who listen to right-leaning messaging through a left-leaning filter. That happens a lot of times. So, and I'm guilty of that too. When I was on the left, I heard right-leaning messaging through a left filter. But these days, for myself, I'm politically independent, and I try to hear out all different types of perspectives, including yours. So once again, I don't want anybody to think that this is, right against left, Twitter space. I appreciate you giving your perspective, where you're coming from, and you have your viewpoints, and that's awesome. And we need to hear different opinions and really understand each other so we can expand our mindset and expand our thought process. So once again, thank you again. Jenny, did you want to add something?
I just agree with everything you just said, Adam, and I also appreciate you coming on and giving us your thoughts. It's very important that we all, no matter how different our opinions may seem, I think that this shows that they're not really all that different. I think a lot of us are just looking to independently think about things. And you made a good point about, voting based on the issues. I think that that is really important, and not voting based on a particular candidate or a particular party, because you're right that the right does kind of look at Trump as their god. And I'm just kind of like, as an independent person who was for Trump before, I'm not about, reelecting him. I think his time has passed. I think the country needs a more even keel person at this point who has, for me, I agree with most of his policies, but we need a more independent minded person, in my personal view right now, to kind of bring the country together more. And I just appreciate you coming on and giving us your thoughts and your opinions. And I agree. I mean, race is thrown around as a political football. I know plenty of racist Republicans in DC. And so it's important to remember that, look at the people's personalities, their character, know what policies they truly believe in. And you can look at people's past and see what they truly care about, to know how serious they are about things. But definitely appreciate you coming on and giving us your thoughts. And you're right. We need to focus on the issues and the policies more than anything else.
Right.
Flex, did you
Yeah,
want to say
no,
something?
I was going to go ahead and, I I've thought long and hard about this. I've known No Justice for a bit, and honestly, we butt heads on a lot of things just because we disagree. I think of his ideology as more so that barbershop intellectualism, where it's easy to it's easy to talk about it because there are a lot of issues. We're on the ground floor, like you said, we're boots on the ground for a lot of things. So you get to see them at the local level, and where black communities have been just disparaged and basically disregarded. But at the same time, I think when you try to apply that to a national stage, it doesn't fall flat, but it fails to pass muster a little bit, which is our whole goal right now is to destroy the establishment power structure, iron grip that they have on all discourse, all politics, all policies. And the problem is the black community, while we are probably the largest minority community, we don't have near enough pull, near enough clout, near enough say or advantage to influence or swing elections to the degree where if we all unified for a common cause, we could basically get our agenda heard. That being said, should we work together with members of the right, members of the center, members of all political walks of life? Should we be able to get behind a more populist message that an avatar, kind of like Trump has brought forth? We can actually, we can get a lot of good things for our communities, and we can actually get these elite establishment cronies that block and basically stonewall a lot of change and a lot of good things for our communities just through the trickle down of implementing national policies that have a strong effect on local economies. If we can get these people out the way, then we can work on group economics. Then we can work on group politics. But until we do that, it ain't no, I appreciate a good Black Power message. I come from a Black Power background, but until we do that, Black Power ain't powerful. There's not enough power to do anything. So that's why I strongly, and I mean, continue to urge you. I strongly urge you to work together, work with the right, fall in line with it. You can't be aggressively centrist when you have both opposing forces pulling so hard. In the meantime, you're just going to end up getting ripped apart in the process. So let's work on this. I'm, I think that your voice, your message, a lot of what you're saying is extremely important. And I think that none of it should be lost because, yeah, black children, black people get lost in the fray all the time. We get booted around, like, punted like a political football when it's fourth down for whatever politician's trying to make that late goal line stand. Or, is trying to basically get the ball into the end zone to finish. But the issue is that that's not a sustaining message, especially when you have to unify and you have to have a coalition. That's not something that divides your power, doesn't help you. So that's just how I kind of view things.
Okay. And no justice. I don't want you to take it as I know you had your hand raised, but we're like on a little bit of a time constraint, and I just want to get as many people to speak. Hopefully next time, if you want to join the conversation, I'd be, glad to hear you speak again. Yeah. Let's go to log scale. You can unmute yourself. Log scale.
Okay. So I agree that we have too much of a problem with too much power. The old establishment has way too much power. That's why I believe we should decentralize the government, if you will. I'm personally in support of something like a national divorce. I believe we have too much centralized power and we need to split it up because it is far too difficult to deal with this massive boulder than it would be a pile of rocks. I also think that when it comes to the morality of politics, whether it's present or not, is to a degree irrelevant because at the end of the day, we have to take responsibility for our own actions. We're the ones who elected these people. We're the ones who see day after day what they're saying, what they're supporting, what their actions are that contradict what they claim to support, we understand where the manipulation and twists come in. So we need to take responsibility. For example, let's look at education. Uh, Whether or not you support CRT is irrelevant. What matters is if you do not support something like CRT, something taught in school, well, then you need to teach your own children. Quit pushing your kids into school for the school to raise them, for the state to raise them, because that's how you get indoctrination. Too many times, I grew up in poor communities. Too often, parents can't teach their kids. They don't have the option. So, what do you have to do? You have to send your kids off to a public school for the state to raise them. And God forbid if you get a negligent parent who just don't care because they just shoo you off. And then when you come home from school, they just basically tell you, oh, go outside, go play, do something. God forbid, someone stands up and actually tries to teach their kids and or at the very least go to these PTA meetings all the time and actually push for a better education. And growing up in these poor communities, quite often, I was a part of the minority. I've been in very poor areas, whether it was in the rural parts of East Texas or in places like Dallas. And one thing I've never seen is people pushing for the correct education. They all say, oh, we need better education. We need better education. What happens? People in groups like the teachers cabal or whatever they call this thing, that these unions, they say, oh, we need more money for books and this and that. And I'm looking around the poor communities I'm in, I'm like, we don't know how to manage our finances. We don't even know how to vote. I barely learned in one class how to write a freaking check. When's the last time anyone's written a check? We are not needing a little bit of this finance class when we get older or a little bit of the civics class. No, at the very least, we need to demand finance as a core class if we're going to have to put our kids into that school. And if you don't like it, as I said before, if you don't like the way that the school is being taught, if you don't like the things like CRT, go to your schools, complain. If you can't fix it, fine. Take your kid out until you can fix it. We need to take responsibility because I don't care what happened. I don't care if it's a communist. I don't care if it's a socialist. At the end of the day, when we vote these people in, when they destroy our country, when they destroy our culture, when they destroy our economy, at the end of the day, we are responsible. Plain and simple. We need to stand up more. We need to say this is unacceptable. Hold these people accountable to a high degree. Put their feet to the fire. God willing, someone out there, some billionaire with nothing to do, decides to say, hey, I'm going to make a website. Every time this politician contradicts what they say they're going to support, it's going to be listed. We're going to have records of everything, and it's going to be plain and simple, sir. So every Tom, Dick, and Harry can see it. And that person needs to be taught civics mandatory, not by just the school, but by their own parents, that, hey, you need to know what's going on in your community. Focus on your community first. Because when it comes down to it, our centralized powers, because no one cared about the community, your own backyard is not getting looked at. It's looking like a trash heap. Meanwhile, you're looking at people thousands of miles away and trying to turn DC into this polished, pretty little dystopian novel thing, and you think you're doing something good. Quit voting for national politics. National politics ain't going to fix the problems in your own backyard. And when it comes to things like police, I've been in small areas. I've been in big areas. You know what I noticed? I don't even go close to a cop in the city. Hell no. In the country, you might find cops that are assholes, but they all know they live in the same community. Their ass is being held to the fire. Their feet are held to the fire. They're accountable to that community. And that's what it comes down to, accountability across the board. We can say we disagree on this politics, that's politics, and we can say, oh, well, this is done for this reason or that reason. Take responsibility first and foremost and focus on making this place better. Don't focus on making it better in DC. Start at home. Start it in your own backyard. Because if your kids don't know, if your community don't know, you're going to grow up being put into a position where you're just pushing in more power and you're like, oh, well, that's what they told me, so I'm just going to follow along. We can't let power centers grow or even be created in the first place. We have a United States. This is supposed to be split up. We have states, but the federal government's gotten so much power because we didn't take accountability, responsibility, and focus on what we're doing. So many damn people go in there and they just start checking off boxes because it's got an R or a D next to it. That's why so many people don't even claim political parties anymore. So, I'm kind of going off on a rant, but I just want to bring it down back to accountability. Be accountable to ourselves and be accountable to the very people that we elect. And when shit goes bad, we need to accept responsibility. I greatly appreciate you allowing me to speak, and I apologize for the cursing.
No, we appreciate you having on, and I do appreciate an occasional curse word or two. So don't worry about that. You're right as far as parents being accountable for their children. I think you're right. I think the pandemic put a lot of parents in a position to really see what is being taught to their children. And I think that's why critical race theory became such an issue, is because it became very obvious as to what was going on. The teachers' unions made it part of their agenda. But I think the one thing that is kind of left out too, because of critical race theory being like the central point that people were trying to fight against, if they didn't agree with it, was the gender ideology aspect. I personally know someone who has a child who was into the school, and they started showing, I can't remember what grade they're in, but they're pretty young. They're not high school age or anything like that. And they started showing them gender ideology videos. And when the parents went to the school board to complain, the school board, basically was patronizing to them. And I think that a lot of people who are in these positions believe that we are subservient to them, when in reality they're supposed to work for us. My son's principal once told me, if the parents don't like it, then we need to reevaluate it because we work for you. That is actually the mindset that's supposed to exist within the public school system. But what I've seen, and I've been a little bit on the boots on the ground, not really on the ground per se, but talking to people who are on the ground and from different states and different areas who are genuinely concerned when certain things are taught to their children. And you have these school boards that are saying what you see is not really happening, or they're called liars, or the DOJ is labeling them as being domestic terrorists simply because they're frustrated that the school board is not listening to them, which is why a large amount of parents are pulling their kids out of schools. They're tired of it, and they're doing exactly what you said. Stop defaulting into thinking that the teachers within these schools or the administrators within these schools have your best interests in mind. Are you being critical of what is being taught to your kid? Are they learning what they should learn to be a productive adult later in life? So, I've met people who are advocating pull your kids out, homeschool. I know people personally who started homeschooling, multiple people. I want to say maybe like somewhere between maybe 3 or 5 people personally who stopped sending their kids to school and started homeschooling because of the exact issue. The school boards refused to change certain things, and they just started teaching their kids. And honestly, I think it's a good thing. Parents are taking control over their kids and not relying on the state to do so. And I think that these school boards, I don't want to say the school boards, but the districts have been using, like you said, in the poor areas, saying that the reason why they're failing to teach these kids is because they don't have enough money. But in a lot of places, in a lot of cities, they get a lot of federal funding. They get a lot of state funding. They're just poor at managing the money. And we don't talk about that aspect. I think a lot of times we try to fix problems by just throwing more money at it. But it doesn't matter if you throw more money at it. You know, you can take a crackhead who has no money and give them $1 million. You know, let's see how long that lasts, because they don't know how to manage their money. You know, and we essentially have people within the government who are addicts to federal money, who just wastefully spend it, hire more people, you know, put it in places, mismanage it. You know, the whole list goes on. So, you know, I 100% agree with you on those points. Flex had to jump off. Ginny, did you want to add?
I just wanted to add that I was homeschooled all the way up until college, and it's much cheaper. Even if you are having to pay like $500 or $700, a year, that's cheaper than having your kids be indoctrinated. And I think a lot of people, I mean, I agree with everything you said, Adam, but basically I think that people having the chance to spend more time with their kids, having the chance to see what that looks like to homeschool them, seeing what it looks like to actually know their kids and spend more time with them personally, I think that more people are going to start homeschooling. I think more work industries are going to start allowing hybrid work situations, which is going to make that more possible for a lot of families, because one of the biggest issues is people aren't home to do it. But I think if we have more hybrid work situations, that will help more people be able to homeschool. But I agree with everything you were saying about people taking accountability. I don't think we need to completely disregard what is happening in DC, but we need to definitely focus more on what's going on in our individual communities and stay up to date with what's happening in DC.
All right. And I just wanted to say we're running close to 2.5 hours in this, which is a little bit longer than I wanted it to go, but it's been a great conversation hearing everybody speak. I'm just going to take one more person. I apologize to anybody who was waiting, but we're just running on like a time constraint. I don't want to run too late. I got to wake up 4 o'clock in the morning tomorrow. So I'm going to take one more person, and you can unmute yourself. Or did they disappear? No, there you are. All right, you can unmute yourself. Dragon. Lady Dragon. Oh,
I
there
think
you
you
go.
need to unmute yourself.
Lady Dragon, you still there?
It should be
Hey,
a little button on the bottom left if you can see it.
I think she is dropping.
No, I think it went away. Do we want to add someone else, Adam?
Yeah. Oh, wait, are they still there? Lady Dragon, you still there? Maybe they fell asleep with the phone next to them, so let me just remove them. And I'm going to add to Chusta. All right, you can unmute yourself.
All right. Thank you for hosting this space and inviting me to speak. I appreciate the opportunity. I appreciate
No problem.
I appreciate all the speakers and what everybody had to say. So my spin is a little bit different. So I know we mentioned critical race theory. I think the element in critical race theory that a lot of people don't want to admit to is that the main premise behind critical race theory is that it's a social construct. So if we really look at that and divulge into that, we're going to understand that the main premise is that it's fake, that race isn't a real thing. And if you really look at the elephant in the room, it'll be the same thing with the civil rights movement, where they're going to incorporate gender and a whole bunch of different things that aren't really included in race when we're talking about race. You guys mentioned some good things about voting independent and doing different things when it comes to election cycles. But here's the thing. As long as we stay in the duopoly of, Republican and Democrat, we're going to be basically kicking the same can down the road. Trump isn't, your mainstay Republican. You guys have to understand that. So the Republican Party doesn't side with Trump. He has his Trumpers, but the Republican Party as a whole doesn't side with Trump. Now, Black people voting democratically and systematically continue to vote democratically, I think this is where I kind of agree with No Justice here, is that us as Black people, we're going to have to, I don't want to say disenfranchise ourselves, but we're going to have to disencumber from this situation if we really want to get results. Because whenever there's something for Black people or Black people want to get something, federal legislation will not be passed for us. However, Latinos can get federal legislation, Native Americans can get federal legislation, Asian community, Pacific Islanders. I mean, everybody, you name it, they're even making up new genders to give them federal legislation. But yet Black people still haven't got the fundamental thing, which is the promise that was given to the freed slaves, which is 40 acres and a mule. Now, and my whole thing with reparations is that if that wasn't promised to us, I really wouldn't fight for that. But that was a law that was made, and it has never been fulfilled. And us as Black people, when we really look at our schools, I know you guys mentioned schools and redlining, holding people accountable, and I won't make it too long here. I know you guys are running short on time. But when we really look at the whole thing, if we understand we're voting for these people, but the school system, a lot of the funding comes from property taxes. Actually, over 70% of actual school funding comes from property taxes. So when we have our neighborhoods that are impoverished and our neighborhoods that aren't worth anything, it doesn't matter how much federal funding we get, because the better majority is going to come from your property taxes. So as long as we continue to do this duopoly of Republican and Democrat and not come up with a third party, I advocate for the Black Panther Party. They were a political party. They had ideologies. If you guys have ever heard of the WIC program, that was started and enacted by the Black Panther Party. So they did a lot of good things for the community. And I think we really need to get back into something that's specifically for Black people, because we're going to always have a losing end of the spectrum, and they're going to always incorporate things, just like with the whole Black Lives Matter thing. It started out as a good thing, but they incorporated too much stuff that now it doesn't matter. It's Black lives aren't the focal point of that. It's not what the organization is about. So and like I said, and what No Justice said, not forever. I'm not saying forever, but I think somebody mentioned that we need allies, or we need to work with other people. And I think this is why we're where we are, because we have worked with other people, and we've put other people's agendas and initiatives before the Black agenda and the Black initiative. And us as Black people, we have to figure out this ideology. We have to figure out what it means to be Black here in the United States. And it doesn't matter if you're Democrat, Republican, Independent, Libertarian, whatever. If you are not for the Black agenda, and we have to figure that out amongst ourselves, we cannot move forward, because we will always keep getting the short end of the totem pole. I mean, historically, we've seen this. So once we come up with who we are as Black people moving forward, where do we want to go? And I like the idea of voting locally. I advocate for local elections. I even have a hashtag that local elections are more important than national elections. However, it doesn't matter who we vote for. Like I think one of the guys mentioned, and holding people accountable. Now, here's my thing with holding people accountable. Because of capitalism, specifically crony capitalism, we can't hold people accountable. We have to step up and say, I'm going to be that person. If you know you're a person with a good heart, and you're even killed, you have to be these people, because we keep saying we're pawning it off to these people, voting for the people, no, we are the people. We have to stand up. We have to run for elected office in these positions. And now we control it. I advocate for socialism. I believe that we do need a little bit of communism. I love capitalism, but I do believe that because of crony capitalism, we still have the problems we have, and we'll keep having it, because only a certain amount of people would control all the resources. And that will always keep going because of capitalism. Once we adopt socialism and socialistic policies, and here's my thing with the Democrats. If you guys heard about India Walton in Buffalo, New York, self-proclaimed socialist, the Democrats actually cheated her out of the election. She won the primary. DNC gave her no support. They even cheated and let the incumbent do some like thing with like, it wasn't like a stamp, but it was like a sticky thing. It was like really breaking the rules. But they didn't support who won the primary, all because she had the socialist in front of her name. So, like I said, we have to get rid of this duopoly. If you are not for the Black agenda, specifically what you're going to do for Black people, then we cannot work with you. I don't believe we need allies. I believe us Black people, we have enough money and resources here in the United States that if we actually put our money where our mouth is, we can make the will of any one of these political parties bend. We just have to do it collectively as Black people. So I appreciate the time and the space, and that was my piece. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. That was awesome. I'm right there with you. And I'm when it comes to the duopoly, the two-party system. I've been wanting and dying for a third party. Even if the third party doesn't win, at least it shakes things up politically, especially on a federal level. I was actually hoping that Trump would say, screw the Republicans and start his own party, because that would really screw people over on both sides. I was actually kind of hoping for that. I'm with Jenny when it comes to Trump. I don't think it's a benefit to have him run again. I think that his name is tainted, and part of the reason why, let's say, on the Democrat side, that they, let's say, lost Virginia is because their strategy was trying to say that Trump, 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 and no one cares anymore. Talking directly to the people won them over. Talking about certain issues that people did care about won them over. As far as like the Black Panther Party, admittedly, I'm ignorant when it comes to the Black Panthers. From my understanding, they appear to be more local. I believe, then they start in Oakland. You can unmute yourself. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. They did start in Oakland, California.
Okay. So, realistically for myself, I have no problem with that. I have no problem with there being some sort of agenda that is put forth that people actually want, that seems to be more locally based. And it could be locally based, but around the country in specific places. So if there's a particular Black agenda, I generally have no problem with that. My only concern is when it becomes, if for myself personally, I don't agree with this particular agenda, or let's say majority of it or half of it, that I'm curious, or I'm questioning certain things, or I'm just looking elsewhere, that not going full force into that particular agenda because it's called a quote unquote Black agenda, that I am all of a sudden not Black, or I am going against what Black people want, or anything like that, because that's ultimately what being a Democrat is today, right? So if you are someone who is Black, who is not all in for liberal policies under the Democrat Party, and you question what they're doing, I'm a former Democrat, and there are particular reasons why I left, and some of it is due to race. The pandering, the constant, I forgot his name, who said before, using Black people as a political football. I did not like that whatsoever. The constant use of racial politics. I thought it was unproductive and it wasn't helpful. And when I leave the Democrat Party, then it's seen as I am not for today's Black agenda. So that would be my only concern when it comes to that. I would love if there are 3 or 4 parties that are organized, that challenge the political establishment, whether it be locally or federally, and that serves the people, especially locally. I think most of the issues that reside in politically, that reside in certain areas that are economically challenged, is because of local corruption. And especially if it's an area that consistently votes in one political party, it does them no good. And no one cares, and no one's coming in to challenge it. You mentioned talking about property taxes. You're not wrong. You're right about that. But the other element is, when I was writing my book, I wanted to research in certain areas. One of the things I found, I only looked at a few cities because my book isn't like I'm staying in my lane. I'm not like a researcher or anything like that. But one of the things that was interesting was just looking at in certain Black majority cities, how much money is actually going towards these cities? How much money are they actually utilizing? And what I found was places like Baltimore, Detroit. I'm trying to remember. There was like one or two other cities that I looked up. And for the most part, within that state, they received more money per pupil than any other part of the state, whether it be wealthy white neighborhoods or anything like that. So in those particular situations, and this is not to say that it's like this everywhere, but in those particular situations, it appears to be more of a mismanagement, corruption, whatever you want to call it. But it doesn't appear to be a resource issue. It sounds like in those situations, there's money, right? And there's a lot of effort to throw money at underperforming schools. The problem is these underperforming schools, what's their incentive to get better when we're constantly throwing money at them? That becomes another thing to kind of talk about. But I want to throw it to Jenny. Jenny, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, I wanted to talk about, what you were talking about. Sometimes they have, the resources, they're just mismanaging them. And there's actually this guy named Corey DeAngelis. I don't know if y'all have heard of him, but he's actually in DC advocating for, students, for the school dollars to go to the students so that they can decide what schools are best for them to go to, and for their families to help choose what schools are best for them to go to. And I think that would help, I think that would help the most when it comes to education, especially in poorer areas and more rural areas. I really think that would be more beneficial when it comes to public school education. But I also wanted to talk a little bit. You talked about you self-identify as a socialist, and you think that we could use a little communism in the country. We're kind of getting a little communism right now, and it's not going too well. And I'm with you on crony capitalism. I think that that's just as bad as communism, to be honest. I think anytime you have concentrated power with very few people who kind of get to decide how everything goes, that's a problem. And we saw it with the pandemic, where Walmart, Target, all these big major corporations were able to stay open, but mom and pop shops were, shut down. Adam, you wrote about that. And it's a problem. It's a problem, but we can't go from one bad thing to another bad thing, or a worse thing, I would argue. I think we need to kind of all come together and realize we can find another solution. And I think that comes when we end the duopoly, like you were talking about.
All right. I said we were going to take one more. Ginny, do you mind if we take just one more? Shannon has been waiting a long
let's
time.
Go for it.
All right. I feel bad just leaving Shannon hanging.
She's been waiting a while.
Yeah. All right, Shannon. You can unmute yourself.
Oh, no, I don't really have a long thing to say. I just wanted to say, I think a big issue with employment, whatever, is you have to know somebody to get employed. So I think that causes a lot of issues. If you want to, I'm a female veteran and I spent 2 years trying to find a job, and I didn't find one until my mom knew somebody, and she's like, oh, my friend said they're hiring at her job. So that's the only comment I wanted to make, was you have to know somebody to get a job. And I think that causes a lot of issues with getting a job. Like, you go through school, you go through whatever, and you just need to know somebody to get a job. And I think that's not fair in a lot of aspects, because somebody that's more qualified won't get the job because they don't know the right people. So that's all I have to say.
Ooh, can I take this one?
Yeah, go for it.
This just reminds me so much of DC, because that is just how it goes with pretty much everywhere in DC. It's about knowing people. It's not about the qualifications. And unfortunately, that's another thing we have to start steering away from, and letting people know, actually, I'm qualified for this job and I think I'd be a good fit for it. And, put your foot down. I would recommend putting your foot down more, and just telling people you believe in yourself, and having confidence, I think, is key when it comes to things like that. But in DC, that's a major issue, and I'm glad you brought that up.
Me personally, I really don't have anything else to add. Jenny, I agree with what you're saying.
It was a good question, and thank you for your
Uh-huh.
service.
No, I have a job now, but I'm just saying, everyone, you got to know someone to get something, and it's not fair.
It's not a lot of things in the
No,
country
I
right
know.
now, but thank you for asking the question.
Yeah. All right. Thank you, Shannon. So I think we'll wrap it up. I want to thank everybody for this great conversation, different opinions, different viewpoints. Flex and Shemeka were awesome. Jenny, you're awesome. Like I said, I want to try to do this weekly or as often as I can. So I know for sure next 2 weeks, Wednesday, 7:30 Eastern Standard Time. Join us in different topics, not just political, but all different types of stuff. So thank you all again, and we will talk to you later.
Thanks, guys.